Okay, question 4. The consumer says, the latest Connolly report suggests that Oxenfry prepackaged meals are virtually devoid of nutritional value.
Okay, so this is a fact. We know that this report does in fact claim that ox and fry meals do not have nutritional value. I'm picturing like lean cuisines or Lunchables, some sort of like, the meals all thrown together. Now, whether or not they actually are devoid of nutritional value and hence are healthy or not healthy is not something we know. We know Connerly says they're unhealthy or at least lack nutritional value, but whether or not that claim is true is still not really established. So I'm ready for them to make a judgment one way or the other. I don't know if we're going to say, therefore, the Connolly report is good or bad, but I'm expecting them to go in that direction.
But the Connolly report is commissioned by Danto Foods, Oxenfry's largest corporate rival, and early drafts of the report are submitted for approval to Danto Foods' public relations department.
Okay, so we're learning more about the Connolly report. It comes from Danto Foods, which is some made up company who is a rival with Oxenfree. So we have motive for why they would want to like slander Oxenfree. But also, you can be someone's rival and still tell the truth about them. Like maybe Danto Foods is just sounding like Oxenfree's food actually is garbage. Like if you are the corporate opponent of Lunchables and you say Lunchables is bad for you, I have to imagine that's probably true. And even though you're a rival, does not mean you are wrong. So if they say therefore Connerly or the Connerly report is incorrect, I'll go, well, no, like this is a possibility that they're incorrect, but the source of an argument does not affect the actual merits of the argument. So I'm very on guard for them to like basically just make an ad hominem flaw and attack Connerly and say, therefore, this report is nonsense. But once again, this is just another fact where it comes from. Still no conclusion. I'm just trying to think ahead about where they may go with this.
Because of the obvious bias of this report, it is clear that Oxenfry's prepackaged meals really are nutritious.
So yeah, that's exactly what we thought might come out, which is they go way too far the other direction. Like we know that it is biased. That is true. But bias does not make you wrong. It is very possible that Danto Foods is actually telling the truth about Oxenfree's like terrible for you Lunchables. It is possible they're lying, but we don't know. We don't have enough information here to say one way or the other. Yet our conclusion does say that. They say it's for sure good for you. And like, no, it might be good for you. It also still might be terrible for you because just being biased does not mean that you are wrong.
Yeah, it's very possible, like you said, that both things could be true. They could be biased and the meals are bad for you. There's we have no actual evidence that they're necessarily good, right? And the question asks us, the reasoning in the consumer's argument is most vulnerable to criticism on the grounds that the argument.
So yeah, it's a pretty standard flaw question, basically asking us what the argument has done wrong. Having been a critical reader, we already know what they've done wrong, which is we've treated bias as evidence of someone being wrong, whereas it's really just evidence that they could be wrong. But when we say with such certainty, we've committed a flaw. So I would look for something along the lines of bias is evidence that you are incorrect.
All right, so answer choice A says treats evidence that there is an apparent bias as evidence that the Connolly report's claims are false.
Yeah, I mean, that feels just like a paraphrase of what we said, which is that we know that Danto Foods is in fact a corporate rival, therefore they are wrong. And I'm like, well, yeah, I see nothing wrong with A to object to. So I would probably go with A at this point and then read
Yeah,
on to see if there's like I always read all five just to make sure. But
me too. Just because you never know. I always say, even if you're willing to bet money that answer choice A is correct, which I think we both of us would here, I always joke that we at least need to make eye contact with those remaining answers, just kind of a due diligence thing.
yeah,
Because sometimes if it's, a sneaky question or it's a more challenging question, sometimes they're clever with the way they might phrase something. We might just misread something slightly and realize, oh, wait, actually, answer choice E is more accurate. Again, unlikely in this situation. I feel like we feel fairly confident it's going to be
yeah.
A, but again, always just good to cover our bases and read the remaining one. So B
Well,
says, oh yeah,
yeah,
go
as,
ahead.
as a human, you're just not perfect. So like you might totally miss
Yeah.
something. And you like it's for you to miss one thing, that's one mistake. For you to miss it twice, you'd have to make two mistakes. And the exponential difference, like let's say you have a 10% chance of making each mistake, That means on 90% of questions, you might miss it on the first answer, but on only one, or sorry, 10% of questions, but on only 1% are you going to make that mistake on two answers. So you really give yourself like two chances to make sure that you have not messed up. And it also takes like, let's be real. We've read this critically. We know what kind of answer we're looking for. If
Hmm.
Madeline or I were doing this ourselves, these four answers are probably going to take us like 5 cumulative seconds to go through all of them.
Yeah,
Like,
it's really just a quick scan, a quick once over, just to make
and
sure. Yeah.
we'll talk through that like way more in depth, go through each answer. But like in our heads, this would not be a fast process. We would have been done by the time I like said this whole sentence with B, C, D, and E. But for our purposes, let's go through those ones.
So B says draws a conclusion based solely on an unrepresentative sample of Oxenfry's products.
So in my experience teaching LSAT, people love to pick these answers, even though I find that they are often not justified. For a sample to be an issue on the LSAT, they actually need to indicate that there was something wrong about the sample. So for example, if we had said like Oxenfree has Lunchables, therefore their, I don't know, like rotisserie chickens are unhealthy for you, that would be an unrepresentative sample because we'd be going from the Lunchables to the rotisserie chickens. But we're not doing that here. We're just talking about their Lunchables. So who cares? Like that is absolutely a representative sample. And
Yeah,
we
the
would do
whole
that
time.
switch.
Yeah, they're always talking about these prepackaged meals. C says fails to take into account the possibility that Oxenfry has just as much motivation to create negative publicity for Danto as Danto has to create negative publicity for Oxenfry.
So yeah, C is technically true. We do technically fail to take that into account. The issue is that we just don't care. Like we're not talking about is there some corporate media war that is happening between these two companies? We're only talking about one direction of it, which is Danto Foods making nonsense claims about Oxenfree? So whether or not Oxenfree is creating like negative publicity about Danto is just not relevant. We just don't care what they're doing. We care about Danto's claims. So I'd say like superficially this looks good, but if you know what we care about, which is the Connerly report false? Is it like misleading us about nutrition? You can know that this one just does not matter.
Yeah, when in doubt, just go back to your argument and go back to that conclusion. What specifically is our argument discussing? That can always help reorient yourself if you find you get a little bit, thrown off. Maybe you're tempted by some of these superficially sound like these answers that superficially can sound maybe okay if we don't really understand the argument clearly. Not even understand, but sometimes even just in reading the answers, sometimes it can be easy to forget the specifics of what they said. So when in doubt, just go back to the text. They don't take it away. D says fails to provide evidence that Danto Foods prepackaged meals are not more nutritious than oxen fries are.
Yeah, so I'd say it's a similar issue to C where we that's not on trial. We're not talking about our Dantos Foods meals nutritious. We're talking about our Oxenfrees. So like D is true. We do fail to provide that evidence. And so often people like focus on like, yeah, we did actually fail to do that because anything we have not explicitly addressed has not been provided. However, like we just don't care. Danto Foods is not on trial. It's Oxenfrees that we're talking about.
And E says presumes without providing justification that Danto Foods public relations department would not approve a draft of a report that was hostile to Danto Foods products.
So on this one specifically, I mean, there's probably more than one reason why this is wrong, but I see Danto Foods. I'm like, we're not talking about Danto Foods. We're talking about the oxen-free foods. So when we're
Yeah.
putting in this report that's hostile to Danto Foods products, I'm like, okay, but we didn't, that report did not exist. The only report we had was one hostile to oxen-free. So, I mean, you can often nitpick multiple reasons, but to me, that's like the damning reason of that's not what we're talking about.
Even if it did say Oxenfry as well, I think it, then it would be factually untrue because they did approve a draft of a report that was hostile to Oxenfree's products. So you wouldn't even be describing something that happened.
Yeah, and that's a great point, which is that often there are multiple reasons why these answers are wrong. The good thing is you only need one
Yep.
reason to conclusively eliminate them. I mean, to pick an answer, you should at least be able to go to bat for every word in the answer as either synonymous to the passage or, well, I should be careful with that. As because you're not looking to match words, you're looking to match ideas of like, well, not even match, but like fill in the ideas. Because here, like this was not in our passage, we just saw it as a missing hole. So, anyways, the point is though, is that right answers, everything needs to be defensible. Wrong answers, it can all be good except for one word. And
Yep.
I mean, none of these answers were good except for one word. But if they were, they would still be wrong.